You probably know what this piece is. The queen, considered one of the most powerful pieces in chess. But what if I told you that this queen is holding you back and could be the reason why you are losing some of your games? Don't worry, I'm here to help. In this video, we will be analyzing the queen in all stages of the game, and finally answering the question of, are you using the queen correctly? Before we start with the opening, first you need to understand piece activity. Don't worry, I'm making a line graph to show you. On the bottom we have the stages of the game: opening, mid-game, and endgame. On the left we have piece activity, meaning how active a piece is in a specific stage of the game. To show how this graph works, let's take a pawn and analyze it. During the opening, the pawn is very active, starting from maximum activity, since a game can't really develop if the pawns don't go fighting each other. But pawn activity lowers during the mid-game, and goes even lower in the endgame. After all, even if you use pawns in the endgame, they will mostly be used to promote. But what about the knight and the bishop? Typically, the knight is more active than the bishop during the opening and middle game. But in the endgame, bishops cover a lot more space, thus increasing their activity. Now these next graphs might make you a bit sad. This is the rook graph, and they are pretty much lonely for almost all the opening. If we include castling, then things get a bit better. In the ending, however, they do pop off. They are the Magnus Carlsen of chess pieces. But what about the queen? This is the activity graph. First, let's start with the opening. One of the biggest mistakes I see beginners make is that they really like to send the queen out in the open since it is so powerful. They do this for two reasons. One, they are hoping to get a piece for free if the opponent blunders. And to be fair, that happens sometimes in beginner games, but that doesn't mean you should just hope to be lucky. The second reason is the idea that if the enemy attacks my queen, I can just move it away since it has so many squares available. That's what everyone thinks before they trap their queen and then they are forced to give it away. So, as we see here, the queen should have minimal activity. If your graph looks like this, then the queen is holding your other piece's development back. You will be more focused on protecting your queen rather than peacefully developing and countering your opponent. If you are making this mistake, stop doing it. Pick an opening you like and go with that. No more of that scholar's mate opening except when you're playing bullet because that's actually funny. Next, the middle game. You look at this graph and you're probably confused. Why is the middle game activity higher than the endgame activity? Does that mean that the queen is terrible at endgames? No, stop overthinking it and let me explain. The middle game is complicated and the queen is an important part in winning your battles. But here is another mistake beginners like to make in middle games. They focus on attacking with the queen instead of attacking alongside the queen. If you find the sentence confusing, let me break it down for you in a way you can understand. Attacking with the queen, you have something like this. The queen is in front of the bishop and it's leading the attack on the enemy king. It looks menacing, but it's terrible. The opponent can block easily depending on the position. And it all has to do with the fact that the queen is worth 9 points. The opponent knows that you won't sacrifice it. So any defense they do is devastating since you can't exchange your queen for a lower value piece. But even if that wasn't a huge red flag, another reason is also coverage. Chess is a coverage game, meaning you want to cover more squares than your opponent. By having the queen in front of the bishop, you do the opposite of that. These squares are already covered by the bishop. The queen is probably better in a place where she can have more influence and cover areas where the other pieces might have an issue. Now let's go over the correct way of playing the middle game, attacking alongside the queen, and this puzzle will help you understand what I mean. As you can see, the queen here cannot do anything on her own. This pawn is protected by the king, and this other pawn is protected by the queen and the bishop. If we check the king, he can just step away and then he quickly trades bishops. However, the queen being here still means a lot when you use other pieces alongside it. So, what do we do? Well, we look at the other pieces and how they can help. The bishop here is kinda stuck. Both e6 and a6 are bad exchanges. However, in complicated positions like this, the knight is fearsome. The correct move is to go knight to c6. Hold on, Mayhem. Doesn't the opponent just get a free knight? Well, no, because if he takes with the pawn, we can take the a6 pawn with the bishop, then it's an instant mate. Black, of course, doesn't do that and goes queen to d6. We then just exchange bishops and then take the rook. Congratulations! You used the queen correctly by working with the pieces instead of leading the attack. And now you are 2 points up of material and the king is exposed. Another funny thing about this puzzle is how useless the black queen is. The queen is defending with the other pieces, instead of defending alongside them. We even have this precious bishop-queen combination which does absolutely nothing. Good job, you learned how to use the queen in middle games. But now it's the endgame, and for that we have to look at the graph again. Why does the queen activity fall off during the endgame? This has a simple answer, because more often than not, they get traded. Some chess players even believe that it isn't called an endgame until queens are off the board. And that's definitely not true, but it's kind of uncommon to have queens as the last 2 pieces on the board. So how should you use your queen in endgames? The answer depends on these 3 things: king protection, queen advantage, and piece connection. Look at this position, and let's understand these 3 concepts. First, king protection. If the enemy king is in the open, that means you have an advantage. Look at this white king. Nothing protects it. If it is checked, it would be forced to move. This white queen covers some area, but the bishop and the rook do not do much. Let's compare it to our black king. This pawn defends the diagonal, and this rook and bishop protect horizontally. This is huge for a simple reason. The white queen has to pay attention to its king, but the black queen is free to roam and lead the attack. Now for the second concept, queen advantage. By looking at the king's protection, you realize that technically you have the same points of materials, but the black queen is worth more based on the position. This is called queen advantage. If you are white, you will want to exchange queens because it really makes life so much easier for the white king. If you are black in this position, you must focus on the king and queen relationship. Never, and I mean never, allow white to check your king and also attack the queen at the same time. That will force an exchange, and you will immediately blow your advantage. Third and final, piece connection. This concept is simple. How well do pieces work with each other? If we look at black, the rook is limiting the king from going on the king side. The queen and the bishop are together, and in middle game that was bad, but in endgame it's the opposite, since there are less pieces and the king is not so easily defendable. In endgames, the queen is free to lead the attack, and the diagonal covered by these 2 pieces is great, even if you don't play the best moves. White, on the other hand, really has it rough. This bishop is targeting nothing. This rook is undefended and has limited movement since it's in front of the king. The queen is just in a bad spot and cannot counter the enemy queen. If we play this game out, you really see how terrible the white queen is. Since the king has no safe squares, the white queen has to sacrifice herself, and black wins the game shortly after. Good job, you learned how to effectively use the queen. That's it. Go increase your chess knowledge now.